Hello, everybody, and welcome to UXDX Online. We're continuing our online series in the EMEA region today. We have another amazing lineup of people coming to share their stories about how they're improving their ways of working and improving how they're building software products. Before we jump into them, I'm going to give a very quick introduction to UXDX and what it is that we're trying to achieve at UXDX and why we run these sessions. So our mission at UXDX is to help teams shift from building software in projects to building software as autonomous empowered product teams. And the reason why that's our mission is because we believe in a high change environment, it's a more effective, efficient, and sustainable way of working. And I mentioned high change there because 20 years ago, software didn't change much. So waterfall projects were probably the best use of resources. Put people on a project over here, work there for a while, disband the team, move to a different part of the company, different software. But nowadays, we're continuously updating all of our software. And that's where it makes sense to have people who are embedded and understand in detail how it works and can just continuously iterate and improve on the product. There's going to be lots of questions, hopefully, as we're going through it. So just ask the questions, whether it be on YouTube, whether it's on LinkedIn, or whether it's on our own site. I'll be moderating those questions and I'll put them to the speakers after their talk. So please do share any questions that you have. But sometimes what happens is we actually run out of time to ask all the questions. And for that, we have our Slack channel. And there's an Ask the Speakers channel in the UXDX community Slack. And we'll put any questions that we don't have time to get through today. Excuse me. So don't worry if we don't get to it in the live session. We'll put the questions there and you can see the answers from the speakers. But that's enough of my introduction. You're not here to listen to me talk tonight. So I'm going to introduce our first of our speakers. And up first is Kristian, who's the CEO at Uitrial, who'll be talking about a new and scalable approach to usability testing. So Kristian, if you can share your screen. Excellent. I'll hand over to you now, Kristian. So take it away. Thank you very much.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hold on just a second. Let me just bring it up. Okay. So everybody should see the slides very well now. My name is Kristian. I'm the founder of Uitrial. We're a company that does a lot of qualitative testing for, well, we have different solutions and products, primarily for the gaming industry, so game development, mobile games. And it's very, industry focused on UX because it's a very competitive market. The companies there, they really want to do everything they possibly can at the lowest cost and at the fastest time frames to improve their product and stand out from their competition at every step. So there is quite a lot of things that I've noticed over several years working in this field, and I wanted to share these with you. And this is intended more of like a QA talk, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to get questions in real time or if there will be any, but it's really aimed at answering some questions from the audience about processes and how individuals from the audience go about doing their testing. This really guides the talk to a certain extent. But anyway, I will start. And the aim of this talk is pretty much to give a basic overview of what it is that's stopping companies from performing very well in their product development, and the barriers there are to it, and how this can be actually overcome, and why this is not really a major thing, and pretty much anybody can start improving their product at any time, even though it seems like such a daunting task. So designers primarily, or producers, depending on the market and what somebody's doing, they have a triangle of factors that they can influence and that come together in their own kind of professional image of a professional working on a particular product. So most have experience and expertise. That's how you're hired, right? That's how you're put into a position. That's how you're put into lead a certain product or develop a new product or an update. But that's really old way of approaching things, and it only gets us so far. Information is something that is possible to obtain only in the present context. So it's not something you can take with you most of the time from your other previous place of work or another industry. It's very context specific. Some markets or industries have a more pronounced effect of this. Information is more important, for example, in more competitive markets where everybody's looking for that, than in less competitive markets like some very cutting edge technology that's coming out and there really isn't anybody trying to do the same thing. So you have a lot of opportunity to actually make a product, and even if the UX is not so good, it still performs well. But information is actually what I mean by information here is the data and the information from the audience on what is required from the product and how is the product perceived by the audience. This is the element that is obtained usually not straightforwardly through experience or expertise or your hard skills or something like that. It's obtained from the fact that you do a certain method or you have a certain process set up with your audience, with your users, perhaps even your target leads that you run ads to. And there are several ways to obtain this information to make a better product, to guide your development, to get insights. But a lot of designers still, even though they understand that they need this information, they oftentimes find themselves lost. And this is actually a vicious kind of, I would say, a vicious cycle of basically, coming to I don't know how to say it. Let's say a barrier of some sort, and then you face it, you try to experiment with it, nothing really works out, and then you sort of fall back to just relying on your experience, reading something on the internet, maybe conducting some studies and stuff like that, looking at your competitors and working with that. So the primary question here for the audience would be, and it would be great if some people could actually put some questions together and send them while I'm talking here. But most of you would actually answer that, you lack actionable information when you develop your product. Because of that, you feel lost and you really cannot understand, what process am I supposed to set up here to actually not feel lost, to be able to get a product, to obtain the goals that are set to it, to have the audience actually respond positively from the start. This leads to a problem, and the problem it's kind of like an organizational problem. So this also leads to responsibility. So when the production team is working on a product and they really can't, get enough insights to build great UX for the product, to actually set it out in a way that provides most value to its primary user target, this leads to debt, as in debt similar to technical debt that developers accrue when they develop a product very fast and then they leave a lot unpolished code, and then they have to return to it, and then they have to refactor all of that stuff, and they have to remember that they have a lot of time set up in the future that they will dedicate to refactoring. Similar here, there is debt collected, and it's because there is an ignorance for the need of information. And as more time passes, more is invested, and there are more needs of things that have to be changed each time. So with each update that you go with a unpolished process, with a method that does not involve information from your audience, what you actually do is you accrue debt that basically becomes bigger and bigger exponentially each time, and suddenly there are no changes that you can do to a product other than basically replace it or maybe rework it, or have, more people in your team working on it. This is similar to, if we think about startups have this process where they iterate, and by that they get information. So they release their first version, they see how it performs. Usually it doesn't perform well because they don't know, what the market wants. They don't have really a good go-to market strategy, and that fails. And then they iterate again and again and again. Obviously, not everybody can do this because not each company is a startup, and a lot of products have been there for a long time and require work. So the question is, how do we simulate these iterations that happen in startups to avoid this debt, to have good information, to build great products, to impress your users? So designers and producers, they start to look into things that are quantitative for this, from my experience. So they go into, they subscribe to services, like Smart Look, or various other analytics services out there that show you the product performance from a quantitative perspective. How many users went into a certain page, and then another page, what were the sequences of their interactions, where they churned, where they didn't, where they stayed most, and stuff like that. But a lot of them actually ignored qualitative. And this is a big issue because qualitative data is actually significantly more impactful on product development than, it's like, it's very impactful. I don't know how to actually stress this enough, because a lot of producers and designers, they just stick to quantitative. And what they get up with, they just get quantitative data, which is super hard to attribute. So it's really hard to understand. So they have these cohorts of users, and then some of them are performing well, some of them are not, some of them have these needs, and some of them churn on this page or not. So you get all of this data, right? So obviously you understand the symptoms of what's wrong with each segment of your product, of its functionality, but it's really hard to attribute to what these symptoms actually lead. What is the underlying cause? What is the value that users are missing? Who are those users? It's really hard with quantitative. And at this point, a lot of the product designers, they just stop. They just think, okay, this is good enough. I've done my job. I don't know, marketing department should provide better leads, or do better targeting, or stuff like that. So they start to outsource the responsibility to the organization. And then the organization also kind of outsources this problem throughout itself. This is what usually happens in most companies, especially startups, and those that are not too experienced in how to build a product. And that is because qualitative is like a step forward. Qualitative research and everything you need to do for that, it's a big step. And it's a big step not everybody is willing to take. And somebody has to take responsibility for that. And somebody has to have the incentive to do that as well. And sometimes it's just too much, but actually it's a lot easier, and sometimes even more easier than setting up quantitative systems. So this problem remains. To symbolize that this is a big step, and why this problem remains, it's really easy to look at this graph. For example, here, majority of companies throughout the world that participated in various studies and surveys say they're not happy with their UX research process. So something is not working right. But the upsides are really, really huge. So they can, if they set up a great product, if they position it well, if they have the right audience coming to it, they can obviously win the market over, and they can sell their product and get a lot of revenues. So there's this huge gap, like, everybody's having a problem, and then there's this upside, but how do we get from this problem to the upside? And a lot of people that I've interviewed and a lot of companies simply make baby steps which are really unstructured or chaotic, and they don't really have a process set up. And then the organizational head or like the bosses, they really don't want to finance all of that or invest into that that much. So what happens is that basically this gap remains, and all of the attempts that are made are just there to actually solidify the stance of the company that this is unnecessary, this is not good enough, this is not structured enough. And there are some ways that you can really start to build a method that's a process that can avoid this, and you can actually show impact and opportunity to your management even at the start, so they can appreciate the possibilities and the upsides that can be taken. So this is another thing, right? Problems for designers, or again producers, if we're talking about gaming, when they start to speak about qualitative data. So they want to find out more about their users, and they want to know more information that way to build better products for them, to drive more value. Basically what anybody would want to do in their position. But they also have individual problems like, they don't have enough free time. They have a lot of tasks. They have this technical debt, the designer debt, or whatever, we might call it whatever we want. And there's too much overhead to set up a qualitative research, center or facility or whatever you might call it. There is a lack of understanding of what methods there are that can be used and which are most applicable in their particular case. Stakeholders don't want to accept because this is additional investment. Qualitative studies are usually quite expensive when compared to quantitative. And a lot of designers also, they trust their intuition. They think that they know what they're doing. Whereas actually in reality, there's always more information out there that can drive you to build better products than your experience or expertise, or even your intuition, which is like an aggregate of those two. So what are the different modes of qualitative studies that we can understand before we try to actually go forward with that? A lot of companies stick to the in-person because remote has a very, despite its upsides, it has a very big problem of actually coordinating the participants of a particular study to get feedback on the product or insights. A lot of people are, in different places of the world. It's hard to reach out to them. They don't really trust you. But this allows to actually build a very good representative of your audience. So if you're doing remote qualitative study, and that is, you're sitting in your office and you're looking for people from your user base, or maybe people from your target audience that can join you in a session, in a moderated or unmoderated session, it can result in a panel which is really representative of what you're looking for. In person, this is like super unrepresentative. I don't recommend this at all. I don't know why people and companies actually do in-person testing. This is like super old school stuff that's absolutely irrelevant in my opinion, unless you have like a cafe or something very localized. There's absolutely no reason to do in-person testing, and it's usually a lot more expensive. Of course, there are contexts where this is the only viable option, like, I don't know, doing UX for Ministry of Defense software or something like that, where you have to have very high control over who's actually participating. But this is a very localized and expensive route to go. And then there's also outsource, which is the other end of the spectrum, and unfortunately it's also very popular. So a lot of the companies that I worked and consulted with, and from my experience, they either do in person or they outsource. And they used to do outsource to consultancies, which charged a lot of money, and it's very non-transparent. So the outsourced company does a lot of research for you, but if you break the contract, suddenly you don't know the processes they actually use to get that information to you. Like, it's completely opaque. You don't retain any of the value you pay for. You just retain the information, the output, basically, which is really bad as well, I think, because all knowledge has to be retained in the company. That's what drives its value. That's what drives the value of the product eventually. So here is, like, a brief overview with a hassle meter. I'd say, actually, this is the graphics are not really representative. They're really are all hard to set up. But I would say that, to start, there are many services right now available for, online software as a service programs and stuff like that. You have user testing, pretty much, I don't know, like dozens of services that can help you with this. I would suggest for, designers to start getting qualitative feedback on their products before they're actually being developed by going to some of these services and trying and experimenting, with very small budgets, and actually asking them questions. I just come to them and say, we have this product, we're working on it, it's not performing very well. We have these metrics and that. We want to find out, how to improve this, how to make it better for target audience. And a lot of them will consult you. Like, they will say, what type of method you should stick with, what kind of process you need to set up. But be wary, of course, because a lot of those, they want to upsell their services. They want to sell you something just like the consultants, so that you stick around. And they also want to retain you, so they won't tell you all the secrets. A question to the audience, because, this is a very problematic section where, like, you have a lot of quantitative data, and then you're starting to understand that you can't really do anything with that to build a product. You go into this whole new area of expertise that you need to learn, which is the qualitative research and moderated testing. You go into, in-person studies, or try to set some of those up. You go to outsource companies. Like, it would be great if some of you shared your personal experiences, because I know all of you have gone through this at some point during your career. And yeah, I would be glad to answer some of your questions. So, moving on. Solution, finding the right tool. Actually, this is, like, far from all. This is not the solution. This is, like, part of the solution. Finding the right tool is, like, the last thing you're supposed to do. But before that, it's really important inside your organization to understand, the barriers there are. And those barriers are usually split into two sections, so two groups. You have organizational barriers. So that's information that, bad processes that are convoluted, very bad communication between departments, stakeholder relations, and all that. And then you have individual, which is the universal need for status quo, reluctance from product designers and producers. Perhaps even you can put some individual stakeholders here as well. Those two segments are really important, in my experience, to overcome in order to, build a great product overall. But this also influences how you build the UX and the UI, and the quality of your product is directly correlated to this. Sometimes you will get lucky and you will get, like, a sales guy come in and be very good and sell you, a service that will provide qualitative insights to your company, to your product, and convince the stakeholders and share the processes with you and provide you reports on how they do it. But this is, like, super rare. I wouldn't depend on it. But in order to work in order for this to work, it's really important for designers to understand that they need information, and for that information to be obtained, they need to go from the bottom up and actually start to restructure their organization, be proactive, and basically promote this idea that this is the way to go forward. Because without this, you will spend a lot more money, you will do a lot more iterations, you will release products that users will not like. Eventually, this will either cause your entire company crumbling on its debt, and to the users, I mean, and actually releasing a new product or starting a new thing again. Or you will overcome this challenge and you will build a great product, and you will have a process, and you will be super happy with yourself because you've set something up and it works, and you basically accomplished what you wanted with this particular company. Once those are dealt with, we actually come to the tool, and there are many tools out there. I would suggest user testing is one of the standard. So let's say you have the system set up where you have sprints, and at the end of each sprint you make a build of your product, of your particular app, and you run that build on your target audience. So you would go to user testing that build, and you would say, can we have some users of this particular audience criteria go through and play this game or user app for an hour or two, and you will get some information there. There are many alternatives, but remember that it's good to experiment, because doing everything in-house is a pain, and not even like the biggest companies out there can actually do this effectively, because this is an entirely self-contained area of expertise that a lot of companies are missing. It involves a lot of organizational skill on the part of people, and in the team that organizes these qualitative studies, even if they're remote. It even requires HR skills, like you have to work with hundreds of testers. Like we in our company primarily for one of our products, we primarily provide value just because we're capable of communicating with hundreds of people from all around the world, in different time zones, and having them do the same thing to a certain quality. Big companies that are some of the biggest in certain industries, they can't even do that. So doing everything in-house is a pain. I wouldn't suggest that. Finding a particular suite of instruments, or a consultancy mixed with instruments, something transparent, something you can get experience from and actually retain it in your company, is the way to go. But it all really comes down to you. I mean, what are your goals right now? It would be very helpful if you could, sit down with your team and have a look at the questions that you have. We have this product, why is nobody using it? We have, this feature that is not being used. We have a particular audience, it's not performing well. When we target them, they come to our app, they don't perform well. We have, some features that are misused, or just get a list of questions with your team and try to understand what is missing from those questions, how to get the information to actually answer those questions, and go from the most basic ones to the more complex ones, and you will start to understand where you're lacking. You're lacking in variety of information. You have very good quantitative products set up, but you're really lacking in understanding what each particular user or cohort is actually doing or thinking in a certain point of time. So you will understand the requirement to get those people and actually talking to them in a moderated test, for example, and try to understand your audience, something that a business development manager would do in a B2B business. But if you're a B2C, this would be like the only way to actually get feedback. Or you might set up surveys on your app, or email your users to answer several questions. By the way, that almost never works because people don't read their emails most of the time. But you will start to get answers. And once you get those answers and you try to do those, you try to, challenge every single point, you'll understand the actual instrumentals that you're missing. And with those instrumentals that you're missing and the anticipation of an upside, if you actually solve those questions, you can go to your management, you can go to your stakeholders, you can say, look, we're performing under the model. We can perform better than the model next month, maybe next quarter, if we do these certain actions, and we have these certain actions here outlined. And once you start to work in this very simple way and you start to dedicate, a certain portion of your time each day to actually think about how your users really perceive your app or your product or whatever you're working on, what are their motivations? What are the underlying reasons for, their behavior within your product? Why do they churn at certain pages and all that? It will make work with the UX and the product in general significantly more easier. I mean, it sounds quite vague and maybe, not super straightforward, but really it kind of is. As soon as you start to actually dedicate some of your time and appreciate the importance that matter has during product development. When you truly understand how important it is, you prioritize it and you start to focus on it more, and you dedicate yourself and you start to see returns on it. And that's pretty much the main thing that I wanted to pass, to the audience here, is that it's never enough to just stay at a certain place, setting up quantitative analytics and product analytics and stuff like that, and then just sticking with that. You have to go beyond that, always evolving, because the market is evolving. There are people out there that are constantly, trying to improve their product, find new processes and methods. And if you're not doing that, you're falling behind. And if you're falling behind, that's not usually a good thing to happen in any market. So this is just something to leave you with. This is like the important features that. Do I not have any time left, or?
Yeah, you're coming up to the end of time, but I'll let you just present this last slide. We do have a question from Christina, but what we'll do is we'll move that into our Slack channel. I'll just give you a minute to finish this slide. Apologies.
Sure. This is the last slide. Basically, it's kind of redundant. It just shows some of the important features you have to look out for, some of the important techniques and factors you have to look out for when you set up a qualitative study framework and start to obtain qualitative information. The most important here, I would say, is three things. The first is actually doing very good due diligence on the participants that somebody is providing you for qualitative studies. If you're using your own users for such studies, that's fine. That's great. That's the best thing there is. If you're using third party, always be super vigilant on who the participants are. A lot of those platforms, they really lie, and they don't lie because they want to. They lie because it's super hard to understand who a particular user is at a certain point of time. There are people who cheat the system. They use VPNs and stuff like that. So you might end up spending a lot of time and money and effort in a study on an audience which appears to be yours, but actually is a completely irrelevant audience. Another thing is, I would suggest doing unmoderated studies, not moderated, because moderated provides you the ability to actually see how the user performs without personal guidance in an app and or a product or whatever, interacting with it just as he would with in daily life. And a screen and video recording is really good to capture that. So you would ideally like to set up a system where you would have a participant from your target audience use your application for an hour or so, or maybe if it's a diary study for several days, and provide you a screen recording of himself using it with voiceover recording. So like if he has any emotions or opinions about a certain thing, or he's surprised, like if he would voice them and if you would tell him to voice his feelings and emotions, and provide the recording as well at the same time. This is like super helpful. This is the universally, like what we found from my experience, what I found is screen recordings of devices or computers with voiceovers are the most helpful to designers and producers to create a great product. And also serving questions at the end. All right.
Yeah, sorry, I just have to interrupt you now because we've just gone a bit over time. But thank you very much, Kristian. I really enjoyed that. I thought it was really interesting. We did get a question from Christina that I'm going to put into the chat, which was around, she said she feels the pain of when you put up that slide with the different kind of problems that people have, and particularly the finance, we can't afford this. So what she was looking for is kind of, what guidance do you have? So I'll put that question into the Slack chat. I'll invite you then into that as well. But thank you very much for sharing, and I really enjoyed that talk. So thank you very much, Kristian.
All right. Yeah. Sorry for the delay here. I really tried to keep it short. Sorry for going over time. Anyway, it was a pleasure, no problem. And thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So up next, we have Lade, who will be speaking to us about how to use secondary sources to guide product decisions. So welcome, Lade. Hello, Lade, can you hear me? We seem to have a problem with Lade's connection. Can see your slides, Lade, but your video has frozen. And I can't hear you. Okay, we've lost Lade, unfortunately. We'll just give her another minute to come back, but we might jump to our next speaker, Sergey. We'll just give Lade another minute first. Hopefully she can get back in. So welcome, Lade.
So I'm going to have to turn off my video because every time I share my screen, my video goes off and nothing works. So okay. Hi, my name is Lade, and I'm a user experience researcher and an experience designer, and I'll be sharing my screen shortly and turn off my video. Share screen.
We appear to have lost Lade again, so I will jump quickly now over to Sergey, and we'll work in the background trying to fix the issues with Lade. So welcome, Sergey.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I hope you can see my screen. If there are any problems with the sharing, let me know in the comments. And also, if everything works, I'm checking at YouTube, the LinkedIn. Let me know in comment section if everything seems to be working properly. Yeah, I'm gonna start with a quick introduction for myself. I'm a design director here at Humbleteam, and we are a design team, and we basically love, I will say two things. The first one, startups, and user experience is the second one. And 5 years ago, I was a founder of two startups myself, and I will say our marketing and sales components, they pretty much sucked. And business-wise, we failed miserably, but everybody actually loved that design and the user experience, and this is how the whole Humbleteam thing started. Since that, we've done some amazing stuff actually, like designing different fintech apps that got plenty of money. Many companies from Y Combinator and Techstar came to us, and yeah, other cool startups. And actually, recently, even engineers from NASA came to us to design a system to kind of like manage cargo storage on the International Space Station. So I will say that being extremely bad at sales and marketing, it kind of like actually paid off. And in total, we work on more than 100 different projects, but a lot of investment around yeah, that's kind of like my build up, and now it's gonna be the act. I will say that many startups they ask us about best approaches to come up with new, creative, and useful features. And even though there is no kind of like a silver bullet, like a single method to design the best UX possible, there is though a method to improve the quality of your product design process. And I will say that there are two things to understand before we go deeper into our cases. I think that design is all about iterations, and I think that basically more you iterate, the better your user experience you have. And the key is to make better design decisions. Key to make better design decisions is to iterate more, and that's kind of like the main thing in the design process. To make good design decisions, you need to go live with your iterations as fast as possible and collect as many users' feedback pieces as possible. If you can iterate fast, you will eventually come up with great design ideas. And if you release, I don't know, one feature in 6 months, you don't have this luxury of iterations, right? So that's kind of like the key for releasing great features. It's basically having the shortest time to market possible and iterating as fast as possible. Our main topic for today will be how to come up with great design ideas and test them as quickly as possible, because the speed is the very important factor. And in my humble opinion, a good release cycle, it's something like up to 3 weeks, including the implementation. And yeah, let me explain why exactly 3 weeks, actually, not 5 or 2, for instance. Basically, if you have 3 weeks, within a year, you can have up to 18 experiments, 18 different releases, right? And imagine you spend, for instance, 4 weeks from an idea to release, and in such a case, you will lose like 30% of experiments, right? If you spend like the whole month to release some feature in your product, you have only 13 launches annually, and it's like 13 versus 18, right? And it sounds a little bit scary to me, because such a pace will be thoroughly bad for your product. And if you have releases every 5 weeks, it's gonna be actually completely disastrous, because it means only 10 experiments for a whole year, like 10 opportunities to share the product and collect feedback. So that's gonna be our conclusion. We need to stick to an idea that we need to try to test product hypotheses, product ideas in 3 weeks, including the implementation. And now I'm gonna go through that particular example from our experience, and I'm gonna show you the design process, how it should look like to meet this 3 weeks deadline. So kind of like a description of the app we've been working on. It's a neobank application with pretty much standard features, right? There is like checking account, debit card, saving account, transfers, top up, all these standard flows you probably already know. And imagine you want to add a new feature to help people save money on their paid subscriptions. Because imagine a user with tens of subscriptions, right? Like Netflix, Spotify, all these things. And a lot of them, from our statistical data, they live from actually a paycheck to paycheck. And here is kind of like the main trick. If you have no money right now, but there is a Netflix subscription charging you, you're gonna get a fee, right? And imagine multiple subscriptions charging you at the same time. That's gonna lead to pretty significant fees in total, right? And it's even scarier. It's even worse because you already have no money in your pocket, right? So there is definitely a pain point to address. Users have late and overdraft fees, and they're not really happy about that. And to solve this issue, we wanted to offer a line of credit for our users. You know, like it's simply $50-$60 to cover those subscriptions with no interest, right? So from this point, let's let's simply plan how we will release such a feature for our application within 3 weeks interval, right? A lot of smart startup-ish people will be, let's put an MVP for this, right? Not a full-scale feature, but just an MVP to test the idea first. Let's check what will be an MVP for such a feature. We can list all the screens we need to design and develop to launch such an MVP, right? Basically, you don't need to read all the things on a screen. It's just to give you an understanding of amount of work that is needed to launch such a feature, right? Basically, first of all, setup. You need to onboard users. You need to recognize subscriptions in their transactions. You need to cover edge cases like subscription cannot be added. You need to edit subscriptions. A lot of things. And then when people use this feature, it's gonna be even more screens, right? Here is my list of subscriptions to pay, empty states, overdue payments, credit line setup, credit line repayment, etc., etc., etc. So in total, more than 20 screens, and it looks like a lot, right? Much more than a design and development team can handle within the 3 weeks interval, right? So yeah, here is the main thing. What we gonna do? We wanted to get back actually to the assumption we want to test initially, right? And let's kind of like check our risks, right? People probably will not add subscriptions at all using our feature, and then we have no data to offer them a credit line, right? Maybe after a launch, our onboarding will be not convincing enough to convert users, and people will not sign up for a feature at all, right? Or maybe after the launch, people will convert, they will add subscriptions, they will use the feature eventually, but it will have like zero effect on the retention rate. Or maybe people will not pay the debt back, right? There are a lot of risks actually, but that's here comes the main point of our design process. Actually, you can prioritize those risks to solve the most important ones first. To me, it seems like the number 3 is the most important one, because if you have no retention increase, it doesn't really matter if people have or have not subscriptions, they pay or do not pay, if they have or don't have late fees, right? This third risk is the most important one. And we can focus on testing this main risk only, because if we fail here, the rest doesn't really matter. And if retention does go up, we will like somehow solve the rest, the bad onboarding flow, I don't know, the buggy flow for changing subscriptions. We're gonna solve the rest somehow if we cover this main point. So based on this, we can basically tweak our plan to test the retention assumption. And here's how it's gonna look like. We can simply manually select people who live from paycheck to paycheck, because they're more likely to use our feature and we don't need extensive onboarding to convince them, right? So we can cross out the first screen in our MVP, right? We can also manually check transactions, and we can add subscriptions manually on users' behalf as well, right? So we can get rid of other onboarding screens from the MVP. And also, we don't really need any interface to edit or change it, since we do it manually, right? So it can be a super, to add those subscriptions manually, it could be actually a super cheap workforce, right? Like a freelancer who will check the database of users, check their payments, and just manually mark subscription payments. So it's like an easy peasy gig for like 2 working days, right? So as you can see, we've already 50% done with our scope, just by actually hiring a student who will do that manual work. And the core idea actually is that when we want to release a new feature, we need to understand what are our main risks, pick the most important one, and test only this single thing. So based on this case, we could kind of like forge the process to test new hypotheses, right? Here are gonna be the first step, determine the value proposition you're trying to test, right? Like it could be, we want to test if adding a line of credit for paying subscriptions will increase retention in our application, right? Then secondly, you need to identify all the risks in your assumption, right? Those are typical risks. It could be, for instance, users do not recognize the product value, right? For example, you've added a crypto trading option in your application, but all the users, they're already committed to services like Coinbase or Revolut, for instance. So there is simply no need for this additional feature in your product. It could be hard to acquire users. We have had this quite a lot. It could be, I don't know, like imagine you have created an application that allows you to find a medical professional in Europe, and it turned out that most major European cities have one of their own, and they know their local market very well, and you're in direct competition, right? And it's gonna be super hard to get new users. It could be hard to make money out of feature, right? I mean, product is being used, but profit and loss statement is still in red kind of situation. And the last but not least is that it could be simply hard to execute such a feature, right? Let's say your application offers help with moving, right? And as soon as you reach, I don't know, 100 requests daily, the city is suddenly out of van drivers with no possibility to recruit more in time. So the feature gonna be kind of like useless. So here are our risks, right? And now we've reached the most important part. You have the assumption, you have the risks, and now you need to pick one risk that you're most likely to face. And also, if you kind of like an additional information, if you want to read more about testing hypotheses this way, I can definitely recommend an amazing article from Maven's CEO on firstround.com. There are kind of like additional things to check. And yeah, that's pretty much the approach we use for startups we work with. And yeah, I do have a couple of other examples because this, it's originally like a 2-hour talk for accelerators. We participate as mentors, but I'm not sure if you have time for that actually. So
I think you can go ahead with another example. You still have quite a bit of time left.
Cool. So yeah, let's try to wrap it up really quick. And it's not a fintech app. So yeah, everybody launches fintech apps nowadays. It's gonna be something different. It's still pretty representative though. The background, the project, it's a mobile application for artists. It basically helps artists have their own artworks in one place. Like it's kind of like a Google Drive for artists where they can store everything they have. And if you're a painter, you usually have materials for your arts all over the place, right? When somebody wants to buy something from your inventory, you send a photo from Dropbox, description in email. Then buyers ask for additional pictures, you send them using WhatsApp, for instance. It's really chaotic process. And the app solves these issues, becoming kind of like a single source of truth where you can upload all your photos, prices, artwork sizes, metadata, pretty much everything. And if somebody asks you, do you have any artworks for my living room below, I don't know, $1,000, you can just like, boom, send them everything in one single email or in one single WhatsApp message. But we had a problem. We had tens of thousands of users, but we didn't have any top-tier professional artists at all. And our audience, basically, it was hobby painters who sell paintings as a side gig, and we wanted to attract those professional folks, right? Real professional artists with, I don't know, 30 years of experience, artworks they sell for $10,000, $12,000, $20,000, but it was really impossible to get them into the application. Why? Because because if they want to upload everything they have into a mobile application, it means uploading tons of things. It's uploading hundreds of photos, filtering hundreds of input fields. Inventory is huge. There are many, many, many artworks. So if you're a professional artist and you see a banner on Facebook like sign up for Marcel app and put your inventory in one place, the onboarding process will be actually a bummer, right? You click on the banner and you need to spend like 2 working weeks just typing in your metadata, uploading images. So it doesn't really look anyhow good. And so here's the situation. We think that our app will benefit from professional artists, right? You can invite, they can invite other artists. They can promote our application. There are thought leaders, but they don't really want to spend their precious time uploading everything they have in the application because they simply see it for the first time in their life, right? So yeah, what shall we do? It's absolutely obvious thing that we need to optimize onboarding for those people, right? For people with hundreds of artworks. I mean, like bulk upload, create some way to automatically sync your Dropbox, for instance, or Google Drive, right? But design and development for such a thing, that will take like a month minimum, which is kind of like against our policy to release every feature every 15 days. So we decided to get back to the assumption we want to test. So this is what our MVP must check. We need to check if top class artists will help us get on board new users, other artists, and we don't want to test if they can go through the onboarding process, right? Or if they will manage to upload 100 artworks, right? We want to test if pro artists will retain in the app and they will recommend the app to many other folks they know or not. So what if we reach out to professional artists? We can ask them to send all their Dropbox links, Google Drive folders, spreadsheets with sizes, like Word documents with prices, and we will create their accounts in their application and upload everything on basically their behalf, right? And you can imagine, like, if you're an artist, you have all your materials all over the place, struggling to even tell the price for the artwork because you simply, I don't know, forgot it. And then just like, you have your whole inventory sorted, systemized in the application, and everything you need, log in with an email and password in the application, which of course, you can set up later. So basically, to test this idea, we needed to hire somebody for 1 month to transfer a bunch of JPEGs and text into the application, manually type them in. And we didn't need to create even a single additional screen in the application, actually. So this example took 0 development time because designer needed to create only a bunch of emails for those professional artists within the marketing campaign, and that was it. So here's the quick recap in a form of our scheme. The value proposition we were trying to test was, we want to test if professional artists will retain in our app. And then here are the risks, right? Artists will abandon the app, they will not upload artworks, they will not pay, etc., etc., etc. There are many of them, but we need to pick the most probable risk and create a flow to test it, and that's pretty much it. And since we have, I don't know if we have some time left, probably not really. We have like maybe 1 minute. So yeah, that's gonna be pretty much the last key study I wanted to go through. Yeah, once again, if you have any questions, I'm checking the LinkedIn and YouTube and Slack. Let me know. We'll be happy to address them. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Sergey. That was really interesting. I think the way that you presented it was really, really engaging, and I thought that it was kind of gave pretty much. I was about to ask questions, and then you kept answering them. So I thought it was really kind of informative. So thanks for sharing that.
Usually, the number one question we get is like, "Oh, do you really release every feature every 15 days?" Being frankly transparent, not really. Sometimes it takes longer, right? But at least if you try to focus on those 3 weeks, even in worst case scenario, that's gonna take maybe 4 weeks, right? But if in your plan you have, like, I don't know, 6 weeks allocated on a single feature, it gets extended, right? And you end up with a single feature within 8 weeks, for instance. So you can at least try to aim right at this like 3 weeks interval. And if it goes a little bit above that, that's totally fine. It's still better than trying to achieve something within like, I don't know, 2 months period. So yeah, don't afraid if you don't make it in 3 weeks actually.
Excellent. Yeah, there's so many different, like Shape Up advocates 6 weeks, Scrum is 4 weeks. So it's good to throw in an extra 3 weeks, or the Amazon every 15 minutes. I think they like to release.
Oh yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, if there's any questions, we'll forward them through to the Slack channel. So
yeah,
thank you, Sergey.
Awesome. Thank you. Cheers.
Great. So up next, and apologies for the technical difficulties earlier, but we have Lade, who will be talking about how to use secondary sources to guide product decisions. So welcome, Lade.
Hi. I hope it works better this time.
It's sounding great now.
Cool. So I'm just going to go into the whole thing. I already introduced myself earlier. So how to use secondary sources to guide product decisions. But first, what are secondary sources? Next slide, please. So secondary sources in research, they're primary. When you do research, it's primary research and secondary research. And primary research is when you go directly to the source, the people who you want to find out more about, the thing you want to learn more about, and you go and do that research by yourself. You do the interviews yourself, you do the surveys yourself, all of that. And secondary sources is the opposite, right? You're relying on second-hand information. Basically, it is research called from other people's research and fact-based findings, essentially. And when can you do secondary research? I think in the first talk, we saw that one of the major problems is that there's like people like there's no time for research, or there may be time, but like the stakeholders are not really convinced that research is necessary or that it's a good thing to do. And so you could just jump straight into doing your wireframes and prototypes and development, or using your intuition and your assumptions about what people need, and all of that. Or you can use what you have available. And the goal of research, building upon what the last speaker said, is really to eliminate risk as much as possible. So think of the biggest risks, the biggest risks in your assumptions, and try to find the answers to be sure that you're on the right path. And so secondary sources can help you in even finding insights, but beyond that, it can also help you with exploratory research or inspiration. So you're not sure what problems to tackle, or what research to do, or what features people are requesting for. When you use secondary sources, you can find direction for even new projects, new challenges, new research. And then a third thing that secondary sources are useful for is competitive research. Typically, when you do competitive research, most people are doing like feature comparison. Oh, they have this feature, that other person has that feature, but we don't have it, or these people don't have that feature and we have it. But you can go beyond that, beyond feature comparisons, when you do your competitive research with secondary sources. So let's get into the kinds or some examples of secondary sources. So think about it. The last time you had a bad experience with a product, where did you share it with? Maybe besides your group chats? Probably on social media. So people share everything on social media. When you have a bad experience, when you have a good experience, the most likely place you will go to first, beyond your friends, is social media. Oh, I tried this new product, it was horrible, do not recommend. Or I watched this new movie, it was terrible, do not recommend. Watch it, don't watch it, all of that. So this is a very good source. You can simply do a keyword search, right? Think about your product, your service. Think about the keywords that are relevant to your product, your service, or your company, and even for your competitors as well, right? So this is where extensive competitive research can also come in. You see what people are enjoying about your product, what people are frustrated about, what they would like, what they think is missing. And so you can, and now more people are more aware of terms like UX. So you can even search for things like the UX of, insert your product name, or the service I provide, or the name of your company. So those things give you insight about what people wish your products had, what they think is missing, what they hate about the experience, what they love about it. And it gives you insight on the problem areas of your product, or maybe feature requests that people have, like, oh, I wish this app could do XYZ, and then you know that XYZ is a feature that people want, and then you can do more research about that and so on. So another way to do this is by looking at App Store reviews. When last, honest question, think about it. When last did you actually look at App Store reviews for your product? And if you've not been doing that, you should, because App Store reviews, sometimes people just put like 5 stars and great app, but sometimes people go into details about like what sucks, what they love, what they wish the app had, and so on. So you find complaints, you find compliments, you find questions, you find suggestions. And the good thing about questions is like if you have a feature already and people are commenting in your App Store reviews and saying, does this app allow you to do this? Then you know that there's a problem, there's a discoverability problem, a findability problem with that feature. And that gives you like, okay, this is a problem that we need to solve if people are not finding a feature that we already have that they would like to use. And another thing is you should check on all the app stores your product is listed on. Don't just check on one or the other one, check on all of them. And a good tip, especially for B2B products where there's not really like an app store that you would download and install, is to check other review websites. So there are many websites that do like review comparisons, give feedback about different apps. Basically, they've done the competitive analysis for you. So you can go to those websites as well and see what people think about your products, especially versus your other competitor products. Now, a third secondary source is desk research. So desk research is literally you getting your Google game on and looking for research from other publications, other sources on topics relevant to your product, your features, the customer needs that you're trying to solve for, your target audience, your assumptions, all of these things. So you have companies like Nielsen Norman, Measuring You, Baymard Institutes, where they publish research on user behavior, best practices, preference, benchmarking reports, and like. Another good source for desk research is like tech companies like Meta, Microsoft, Google, Spotify. They often post case studies, best practices based on the research they've done, and they often post on sites like Medium or even on their own company website. And then the research that you search for doesn't necessarily have to be focused on UX, right? Or other tech company websites or publications like Nielsen Norman and the ones I mentioned. For example, if you're working on something in VR, AR, voice, the automotive industry, there's a lot of academic research papers, best practices that publish insights on best practices, on experiments, tests, things that can answer questions that you might have and you may not have the time and resources to get into, especially in the social sciences, social psychology, human computer interaction. You can search for academic papers. You can check on sites like Google Scholar and find valuable research, ResearchGate, Google Scholar, and find valuable research there. And desk research can also be internal. It's not always external. So if there are other teams within your company that are able to do research, you might want to see what research have they done in the past and what findings do they have. And you can buy reports from external parties as well. And finally, final secondary source that you can look to when you can't do primary research is to look internally, look inwards, look at your company. I already mentioned existing research that might have been done. But another way to look internally is to look at your customer-facing teams, your user-facing teams, whether you're a B2B product, a B2C product, a B2B2C, whatever kind of products you offer. There are always people within the organization or teams that are always in contact with users. So first easily comes to mind, customer support. If you have a customer support team, they're definitely in contact with users. Marketing, sales, account managers, whatever name you want to call them, there are people within your organization who, it may even be the founder, right? If it's a small startup, founders are usually in contact with users, especially in the B2B space. So talk to those people, ask them questions, ask them about feedback, ask them about complaints, ask them about what people are saying about the product, and so on. And then a good way to also look internally is to create an internal research panel. So a research panel is simply a group of people that you can reach out to constantly to get feedback and ask questions. And if you do research, you should probably have a panel. It makes recruitment so easy. But an internal research panel is if you're not able to go external, whether from your user base or use third-party sites like user testing, like the first speaker mentioned, you can look at people on your team. You can have interviews with them. You can do usability tests, show them concepts, particularly when they are similar to your target audience. So for example, if your startup is creating something for new parents, you can look on your team and see if there are any new parents on your team and ask them those questions. Or with the previous example, maybe you're creating a tool for amateur artists to sell their artwork. I know he said professional, but suppose amateur artists to sell their artwork, and then you have people on your team who are amateur artists or beginner artists and want to sell their artwork. You can also talk to them. And very important is not just is if you can't find people who fit the specific attributes of your audience, is fine, but try as much as possible to consider the behavioral things, the psychographic things, because those are the things that are really important. The behavior is what is the more important thing, more than demographic things like age and gender and all of that. What is most important is behavior. Cool. And then, so now what next? You've gone to all the secondary sources, you've found so many useful and relevant things. But before we go into the what next, important to note that secondary sources do not replace actual user research, actual going out and doing your own primary research. What they do is it's a good starting point when you have limitations around what you can do. It helps you. So when you've done all of this secondary research and you have valuable insights, it helps you build a case for doing primary research. It helps you also, if you're not sure, like what particular, an example is when I worked on Chrome, we're looking at what are the things, like where should I focus on in what target audience, because the Chrome has like lots of different kinds of users. There are people from like whatever behavior or demographic definition you want to give. There's a wide range. And like, where should I start from? I started doing exploratory research. I spoke to people that I knew personally. I checked the App Store reviews, and that gave me a sense of where to narrow down my research on. So that is what secondary research can also help you do. It can help you focus on where you need to look at, or where you need to ask more questions and do further research. So now, what next? So with every kind of research you do, whether primary or secondary, you need to do analysis and synthesis. Very, very important. There's no point in just collecting all the data and then just leaving it there. So what you need to do is categorize what you found. So a way that I've done this in the past was I put into feature requests, customer complaints, and whatever other category makes sense. So I've done feature requests, customer complaints, positive feedback, and stuff like that. Just create whatever categories make sense for your product service offering, and make sense, and use that to make sense of what you have gathered. You can do those things, affinity maps, whatever makes sense for you to synthesize, just do that. Second thing to do after synthesizing is to share. There's no benefit to doing all of this great work if you do not share. You need to discuss the findings with your team. You need to discuss what you have noticed, what you have seen, what stands out to you. You need to discuss all of those things with your team. Quantify whatever you can. So for example, if you look through the past year of App Store reviews, and you can say something like, oh, 10% of App Store reviews in the past year are people requesting for a particular feature, for something like that. Or if you're talking to customer support or looking at customer support tickets, you can say, oh, in the past 3 months, 70% of customer support tickets have been about a specific complaint on this screen or flow or feature or something, right? So, or 3 in 5 requests are for Y feature, which other competitors have, but we do not have. And sharing all of this with the relevant people, which usually be the product manager or whoever else is making the product decisions, leads to the next step, which is to prioritize. So once you've synthesized, you've shared, I couldn't find an S word for prioritize. So prioritize. You prioritize with those people. You need to think about these insights that you have. How relevant are they to the business goal? Is it low effort and high reward, or high effort and low reward? Is this already on the roadmap? So if you see on your from your research, it's like, oh, most of the feature requests are for this particular feature, but it's already on the roadmap. So you need to ask, okay, do we need to move this up on the roadmap, or do we need to add it to our roadmap? Is it relevant to us? Do we want to do what other people are doing? And is this a thing that matters? So you need to prioritize all of what you found with your team. You need to define how severe the problem is. Are you losing users? Are people saying things like, "I'm this because I need this feature, this app doesn't have it, so I'm going to use this other one in social media or in the App Store reviews or wherever"? Are you seeing increased frustration in the customer experience that's impacting things like customer satisfaction scores and all of that? So those are the things that help you prioritize. And then finally, once you have prioritized, you need to act. It's not enough to synthesize, to share, to prioritize if you do not act. So acting can be you following up with the product manager. If there's no, like, if you as a designer, there's no like additional thing that you need to do, is to follow up with like the PM, or whoever makes the decision on what's next. Acting can be you directly implementing wherever possible. So, for example, if you're saying that people are constantly complaining about a particular flow or screen in the app or the website or whatever, you can start making design changes. You can create a new wireframe or a new prototype to test to improve that flow. Acting can be doing more research to uncover how severe of a problem this is, or how relevant of a need this is, or how important of a pain point this is to address for your business and to solve. And that's it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah, we finally got there after a few false starts with the technology, but thank you for sticking with us. Yeah, so I love that approach. I'm just having a quick look to see whether anybody has sent in anything. I don't see any questions from the audience. I guess it's kind of, one question would be for me. So that's looking at the secondary. So when do you personally choose secondary is enough, or I should start doing some more primary research?
It depends. So there's a matrix that I discovered. I can't remember what it's called now and who developed it, but basically you need to think about what are the risks of implementing a solution. So if you want to just like maybe change a flow, change something on your screen that wouldn't like impact too much, like maybe um you're not changing something major, you can go ahead with your secondary research. But if it's like, should we kill a feature or should we create a new feature, then you probably need to do some more research beyond the secondary sources. The secondary sources help you to throw some weight behind your argument that, okay, we need to do more research around this because this is what we're seeing on an exploratory point of view. But if it's just like, oh, maybe we need to change the copy is not working, people don't understand the copy, you don't need to go and then do like larger scale research. You can change the copy and see what happens, right? It's not like it doesn't take too much of anyone's time and effort and resources beyond the person who's going to develop the copy, as opposed to changing an entire flow or removing a feature, adding a new feature, which requires a lot of effort, time, resources. I will try to find the framework that I refer to and share with you. I do not remember what it's called anymore.
That'd be fantastic. If you could, that would be really appreciated. I'm sure people out there would love it as well. The other thing is more a comment, but I was just thinking while you were presenting, and I've come up with stack, rank, and start for prioritize and act. So that gets it in the essence.
I actually discovered a tool called Option. I think it's called Option X, Opinion X. But the main thing they do is stack ranking. That's like the primary purpose. So yeah, you can do things like stack ranking, the Kano model. There's so many like prioritization frameworks and metrics that you can use.
Excellent. Well, I'll just check last if there's any final questions. No, I think that's it for questions. So that brings us to a close. Thank you very much, Lade, for sharing your insights. Really enjoyed it. And I think the slides were lovely and colorful as well. It's always nice to see.
Yeah.
So
thanks.
Thanks, everybody. So that brings us to the end of our event tonight. I just want to thank again Lade, Kristian, and Sergey for sharing all of their insights. If you did like what you saw there, we do have our EMEA conference coming up in just in October this year. We'll have 50 speakers, 12 workshops, 2,000 attendees. So if you liked what you saw today, it's going to be that, but just significantly larger and a lot more people and physical in person. So please do come along and join us for that. But I think that's everything for tonight. So thank you everybody for joining us, and talk to you again soon. Thank you.